So with environmental narratives, we tend to repeat the same stories we hear, and then we kind of get stuck in these same storylines. So is it that agriculture is bad, or that, you know, it's a story of poverty? And with some of the literature I've been drawing from, it's calling for new narratives that kind of break those binaries and bring us new visions of the future. And I'm trying to listen for those when I'm doing my research. And I had a really great interview just last month with 2 community members from a farm working community. One was a farm worker himself who came over from Mexico when he was 16, worked for many years, was injured on the job, can no longer work in the fields, but he's been very proactive, and he's now a city councilor. And they both told me, you know, we're tired of being spoken about as these disadvantaged communities, as these pobrecitos, these poor people. You know, we don't want to be pitied. And see, we are hardworking people, but we're also incredibly creative, incredibly skilled. And we kind of need to think about, you know, these are communities that we need to invest in. If we just keep talking about them as these poor people, people are not going to invest in them. And one example of this was they had actually, in one of the communities, they had a well, and so they created a community garden for the farm workers. And he said, everyone who's been involved with that, you know, we have access to our own food, we can grow the food from Mexico, and I think it's just, you know, finding these new ways of talking about the drought, I think gives us a hope for the future.
We'd like to open the floor for questions. Questions?
Way in the back. Right, did everyone hear that question? Okay, so she asked about how do we deal with doubters of climate change, and especially when it comes from a place of religion. I don't know if you had anything, but I've got. Sure. So most of the people that I speak with do tell me the drought has nothing to do with climate change. Climate change does not exist. And I think it's because they also, especially in the Central Valley, they blame environmentalists for their problems. And so climate change has kind of brought in together into that department. And a lot of the farm workers I spoke to are people who are social service providers. They don't believe in climate change, or say, you know, even if we do believe in climate change, we have to worry about so many other things about, you know, getting food on the table. That's like the least of our worries. But that is a problem that is going to have to be faced in the area. When it comes to religion, there are actually a lot of people who are doing research and work on that, where they're, you know, kind of bringing the religious narratives where environment is an important issue that has to be protected.
Other questions? I've got a mic in case someone, oh, you do too. Okay.
I was wondering about the corporations. So these aren't small farmers, these are people who work for large agricultural corporate conglomerates. Thank you. What's their role in all of this? What are you seeing in terms of their sense of responsibility for the situation?
So yes, a lot of the farming there is either, when you talk about family farms, these are massive corporate family farms. Palm Wonderful is one of the biggest corporations in the area. And you get, you know, and I ask people, how are these different corporations addressing the situation, and you get a wide range. No one corporation acts like another one. A lot of them do give a lot of money to the community food banks. And also the distribution of water done in East Porterville is all coming from corporate contributions. But then you also have a lot of people who are not, and they don't, you know, the fact that they're paying just their workers so little is why they're vulnerable to the drought in the first place.
Other questions? I can't.
In the back?
In the back.
But it occurred to me, you know, the drought in the 30s, which you spoke about, and we heard this lovely music. Had you thought about comparing the narratives of today with the narratives in song or whatever is left, whatever artifacts are left in the 30s?
Because of this, it's something that's kind of on my to-do list. But I think one interesting comparison is how we addressed the drought in the 30s. It wasn't just through there was a lot of charity and a lot of, addressing the homelessness. But there was also a lot of change in agricultural practices because of the drought. A lot of the erosion came from the practices that contributed to the Dust Bowl, and after that, a lot of the practices changed. And so I'm hoping that, this drought will actually kind of increase water efficiency in the way we think and use water in the area. And one actually promise of that is California did not have any groundwater legislation prior to this drought, and now it does.
What about the meats? I just Googled it and found out that 1/3 of a pound burger requires 660 gallons of water, which means that to grow a cow requires 2,400,000 gallons of water. So makes meat look a little bit like a real luxury. What are your comments on that?
It is a luxury. Definitely. I mean, almonds are not, if you're looking for a villain of agricultural consumption, it's not the almond, it's the cow, especially in the Central Valley where dairy is such a big part of the agricultural industry. One of the big ways that people say if you want to combat climate change is maybe not eat meat for one day of the week. That's just a small step, but it's a huge factor in our water consumption.
This is such a thorny problem. I mean, you really need to do a grid and say what might be all the ways. But how do you feel that the newly passed minimum wage will help these farm workers and farmers?
Right, so California just passed the minimum wage act. It's going to actually increase wages, and I think that's a great issue for them. They've been fighting it for a long time, and that's only going to help them address their problems. However, a lot of the people who are undocumented workers, and they're not necessarily getting that full wage, they often have to pay their labor contractors, because farmers don't hire the farm workers themselves. They use labor contractors. And these labor contractors often illegally charge farm workers for transportation, for their tools. I mean, the practices are horrifying in the area.
Why has not California done more for desalination plants?
So it's starting. I think the plans for Santa Barbara have been taken off the shelf, and they're starting to implement that. There's one in San Diego. I'm not a desal expert, so, but it is very expensive, and so far they've not finding that price, the cost efficiency. Another issue is that a lot of people don't want to live next to a desal plant.
I'm a native Northern Californian, and in 1970s we had a drought. We had restrictions so that the water could all go down to Southern California. I moved to Southern California and I saw the atrocious waste. People washing instead of sweeping, they would wash off their sidewalks and their driveways, and they were doing this up until 2 years ago. I think that is probably too much building, too many swimming pools, and too many people, lack of water conservation in California has impacted, and I'm going to have to say Southern California because we learned how to take care of our water in Northern California. So I really feel that the farmers are probably still being sacrificed because of the swimming pools, et cetera, and the green grass. The green grass.
It's actually been fascinating, especially when I interviewed a lot of people in Sacramento, a lot of government officials. The one kind of personal connection that everyone had with the drought was their grass. And it's coming from Tucson, where it's not, it's not valued as highly. It seems kind of interesting. But as your point speaks to what a lot of water experts say. There isn't one silver bullet that's going to solve the water issue. It has to. You have to deal with supply, and we also have to deal with consumption.
Hi. I just want to focus on one of the issues, and that's development versus farming. I live in a divided household.
My husband and I debate this frequently because we drive to and from Phoenix. We see the farming. We were in the Central Valley last year. My husband's view is that, well, we both agree that development should be done slowly on a rational basis to make sure there's water for new developments. But where we disagree is he thinks that we live in a desert, there should be no farming in Arizona. My problem with that is that if you extend that, you might say, well, we don't need Pima cotton or whatever else, the few things being farmed here. But if you look through to California, and you quoted yourself, 90% of the almonds and many other things, my question is, are we willing to shut down farming and depend on Chile, Mexico, Hawaii, et cetera, for our food, which costs will go up, which will hurt poor people even more, as well as everybody else. So my question to you is, who is going to make the decisions looking at these various groups who have differing interests?
That's a complicated one. No one wants to tell a farmer what they can and cannot farm. And that's a line that's no one been willing to cross. The U.S. government does provide subsidies for certain crops. And in fact, Central Valley used to be mainly cotton, and it is no longer because that subsidy has been removed. Farming is part of the identity of the Central Valley. I don't see that ever going away. It's the only job available for people. In one way or another, everyone is connected to farming. And so I don't think, kind of for the sake of water consumption for the cities, are you going to take out farming? I just don't see it as a viable option.
Anyone else? Yes, there's one in back.
I have a comment, and I know this goes against a lot of people's grain. However, I'm a native of Tucson, and I've watched, ever since I was in elementary school, talking about the CAP water. The CAP water, there is a reason why there's competition between Tucson and Phoenix, and it's not just the athletics, ladies and gentlemen. It happens to be the fact that Phoenix gets a lot of the water, and because they promote their legislators, they promote the farming, they promote the green. I remember when Tucson looked like all Winter Haven. That is what Tucson used to be. And in the late 60s, we were going to run out of water. And so everybody pulled out their grass, and in the area that I grew up in, everybody put in gravel and rock in the front. It has totally made Tucson a very different place. I teach third grade, as I said, and we're known for the Pima cotton. We are known for the 3 C's. And Arizona has missed the boat. I understand that there's a fine line, but it's cattle, copper, and cotton that make and break our jobs. And all of our kids grow up and they go to Phoenix for jobs. So, there was a big to-do about the Green Valley mine, and I can't remember, I've had 2 glasses of wine already, so I can't remember the name of the wine, the name of the mine. But the point really is that there has to be a happy medium. And I think all of us need to find that happy medium. It isn't just about getting rid of something. We have gotten rid of our jobs. We've gotten rid of our children. My kids are both up in Phoenix. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think there's a hand up.
Is there a hand back there?
Hi, I'm Maria.
It's nice to have you both here. The lady sitting next to me had a really great statement saying that the music was just such a wonderful way to make what you're saying so potent and dramatic for us. And I really appreciated that. And I wonder if some of the music, some of it had themes that I thought I recognized.
Yes, indeed.
Gershwin, maybe.
Yes, indeed.
Could you tell us about the music?
Essentially, the music, first of all, it's the music that one associates with the United States and the Great Plains was oddly enough originated by a Jewish guy in Brooklyn. His name, of course, was Aaron Copland. And you probably heard a lot of the empty, that sort of sound that he uses to paint emptiness and the vastness of the plains. You probably also noticed that this was not beautiful music because the subject is not beautiful. The tunes that were incorporated are cowboy tunes. There's one at the very, very end. We're going to leave now. We're going to head west now. And so indeed, you were right when you thought you heard things disguised. This indeed is folk music. But the words that I uttered are not my own, of course. This is the script from The Plow That Broke the Plains. If you look around on YouTube, you can actually see this film. And when we first got together, it was a matter of bridging a gap, an artistic gap, essentially not bridging a gap, but collaborating on bringing the idea of a narrative about drought alive in different ways. My narrative, of course, is by playing music and reciting words. And of course, Christina has also recited words of other people. And this of course is the big question. She is very hopeful that the changes brought about by the issues of the Dust Bowl will be mirrored a little bit later. We always hope. Yeah. So we'd like to thank you for listening. We hope that we made you think. That's one of the wonderful things about the issues that are brought to the table through collaborations like this. We like to think there's something for everyone, even though the story is not a wonderful one. But thank you very much for listening, and thank you to the Westcotts for bringing us here to you. This is an invaluable thing that essentially opens minds, and I'd like to thank Bill and Johanna.